A son abandoned his 81-year-old mother in the wilderness to die. But a loyal dog who had every reason to hate humans changed everything in the most beautiful way possible. Before I tell you this true story that will restore your faith in loyalty and make you cry tears of both heartbreak and hope, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you believe that sometimes heroes come with 4 paws, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what this abandoned dog did for 12 hours in freezing mountains will leave you speechless. The autumn afternoon of October 15th was cold and gray when Marcus Davidson, 52, drove his rental car deep into the Cascade Mountain forests of Washington state. In the passenger seat sat his mother, Dorothy Davidson, 81 years old, wrapped in her favorite blue cardigan and clutching her worn leather purse. "Where are we going, Marcus?" Dorothy asked for the 3rd time, her voice showing the first signs of confusion that had become more frequent in recent months. "I thought we were going to the doctor." "Change of plans, Mom," Marcus said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. We're going somewhere else first." Dorothy had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 8 months ago. The progression had been swift and merciless. She repeated questions. She forgot names, sometimes even Marcus's name. She wandered at night. She needed constant supervision. And Marcus, a middle manager at a tech company with 2 teenagers in expensive private schools, a mortgage on a house he couldn't afford, and a wife who had made her position crystal clear, had reached his breaking point. "I can't do this anymore," Sarah had told him 2 weeks ago. "Your mother needs professional care. Memory care facility. Nursing home. Something. But she can't live with us anymore. It's destroying our family. Those places cost $8,000 a month. We don't have that. Then figure something out. Because if you don't, I'm taking the kids and leaving." "I mean it, Marcus." He had looked into facilities. The good ones had year-long waiting lists. The affordable ones were nightmares of neglect and abuse that he'd seen in news reports. Medicaid wouldn't cover anything until Dorothy had spent down all her assets. The small house she owned, her savings, everything. And even then, the process took months. Marcus had felt walls closing in. And in his desperation, a dark thought had formed. What if she just disappeared? Not dead. He wasn't a murderer. But lost. Somewhere remote. Where she'd be found eventually, by hikers or rangers, and taken into state care. Where there'd be no connection to him. Where he could claim she'd wandered off, gotten confused, and he'd been desperately searching. It was the plan of a desperate, broken man. But Marcus had convinced himself it was his only option. Now, driving deep into the national forest, 40 miles from the nearest town, Marcus searched for the perfect spot. He found it, a trailhead for a moderately popular hiking path. Popular enough that someone would eventually find her. Remote enough that it might take a day or 2. "Come on, Mom," he said, helping her out of the car. "Let's take a short walk. Get some fresh air before the doctor." Dorothy, trusting her son completely, took his arm and walked with him down the trail. They walked for 20 minutes, getting deeper into the forest. The trail was well marked, but there were numerous side paths and game trails branching off into the dense woods. Marcus guided his mother to a fallen log just off the main trail. "Sit here for a minute, Mom. Rest. I'm going to get something from the car." "Okay, dear." Dorothy sat obediently, still clutching her purse. Marcus looked at his mother, this woman who had raised him alone after his father died, who had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, who had been at every soccer game and graduation. This woman who had once been sharp as a tack, who had managed a small business, who had been his hero. And now he was about to abandon her in the woods. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart. Don't be long. It's getting cold." Marcus turned and walked back toward the trail. Each step felt like lead. His chest was tight. Tears streamed down his face. But he kept walking. When he reached the car, he looked back one more time. He couldn't see Dorothy from here. She was hidden by the trees, around the bend in the trail. He got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. Dorothy sat on the log for 10 minutes. Then 20. Then 30. "Marcus," she called. "Marcus, where are you?" No answer except the wind in the trees. She stood up, confused. Which direction had he gone? Where was the car? She tried to find the trail but got turned around. Everything looked the same. Trees, undergrowth, fallen leaves. "Marcus!" she shouted louder, panic rising in her voice. The temperature was dropping. It was 4 p.m. in October in the mountains. Darkness would come early. And Dorothy was wearing only her cardigan, slacks, and house slippers. Not equipped for a night in the wilderness. She walked in what she thought was the right direction. But Alzheimer's had stolen her sense of direction along with so many other things. Within minutes, she was hopelessly lost. "Help!" she called weakly. "Someone help me." But there was no one. The forest was vast and empty. Dorothy sank down against a tree, clutching her purse, starting to cry. "Marcus, please come back. Please." What Dorothy didn't know was that she wasn't alone in these woods. About half a mile away, staying hidden in the dense undergrowth, was a dog. A large German Shepherd mix, about 6 years old, with a thick coat of brown and black fur and intelligent amber eyes. His name was Bailey, or at least it had been, 3 years ago, before his family had moved across the country and decided that taking him was too complicated. They'd driven him out to this area and let him loose, telling themselves he'd be fine, that he'd find another family. Bailey had survived. He'd learned to hunt small game, to find water, to avoid the bears and cougars that prowled these mountains. He'd become wild but not feral. He still remembered being loved, being part of a pack, having a purpose. And when he heard Dorothy's cries for help, something ancient in his brain activated. Human in distress. Pack member in danger. He moved through the forest silently, tracking the sound and scent. And when he found Dorothy, this elderly woman alone, confused, crying against a tree, Bailey made a decision that would change everything. Instead of keeping his distance as he'd done with other hikers over the years, he approached. Dorothy looked up, startled, as the large dog emerged from the undergrowth. "Oh," she gasped. "Hello there. Are you lost too?" Bailey sat down a few feet away, watching her with those intelligent eyes. "I'm Dorothy," she said, her Alzheimer's mind treating this like a normal social interaction. "I'm looking for my son. Have you seen him? His name is Marcus." Bailey tilted his head, listening. "I'm so cold," Dorothy continued, starting to shiver. "And I don't remember how to get back to the car." Bailey stood and walked closer. He sat right next to Dorothy, pressing his warm body against her side. And Dorothy, with the simple trust that Alzheimer's sometimes brings, put her arm around the dog and held on. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for staying with me." As darkness fell over the Cascade Mountains, Bailey remained at his post, sharing his warmth, standing guard, fulfilling the purpose he'd been bred for thousands of years ago: protect the vulnerable. Dorothy Davidson was no longer alone, and Marcus Davidson, speeding back toward Seattle, was about to discover that some betrayals come with consequences he never imagined. The temperature dropped to 38 degrees Fahrenheit that night. Not freezing, but dangerously cold for an elderly woman with early-stage hypothermia and only a thin cardigan for protection. Dorothy drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she remembered she was in the woods. Sometimes she thought she was in her childhood home. Sometimes she called for Marcus. Sometimes for her long-dead husband, Robert. But through it all, Bailey stayed. When Dorothy's shivering became violent, Bailey pressed closer, practically lying on top of her to share maximum body heat. When she tried to stand and wonder, the dangerous confusion of hypothermia setting in, Bailey blocked her path, gently but firmly herding her back to the sheltered spot against the tree. Around midnight, a cougar appeared on the ridge above them. Bailey caught the scent immediately and stood, placing himself between Dorothy and the predator. He didn't bark. That would waste energy and might worsen Dorothy's condition. Instead, he growled, low and threatening, holding his ground. The cougar, weighing risk versus reward, decided this meal wasn't worth fighting a determined dog over. It disappeared back into the darkness. Bailey returned to Dorothy's side. "Good dog," Dorothy murmured, barely conscious. "Such a good dog." Meanwhile, 50 miles away in Seattle, Marcus arrived home at 8 p.m. Sarah was waiting. "Where's your mother?" She wandered off," Marcus said, the lie he'd rehearsed feeling like ashes in his mouth. "We were at the park near her house, and I turned my back for 1 minute, and she was gone. I've been searching for hours. I need to call the police." The performance was convincing, aided by the genuine panic and guilt churning in Marcus's gut. He called 911. "My mother is missing. She has Alzheimer's. She wandered off this afternoon. I've been searching everywhere." "Where did you last see her, sir?" And here was the lie. "Seward Park in Seattle. Around 3 p.m. Not the Cascade Mountains. Not a remote trailhead 40 miles from nowhere." The Seattle Police Department initiated a missing person search. But they were searching in completely the wrong place, an urban park, not a mountain wilderness. As the night wore on, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his mother, alone in those woods. Had someone found her yet? Was she okay? Part of him wanted to call back, tell the truth, send help to the right location. But that would mean admitting what he'd done. Arrest for elderly abuse and abandonment. Possibly attempted murder. Loss of his job, his family, everything. So he stayed silent. And Dorothy stayed in the woods, with only Bailey between her and death. Dawn broke cold and gray. Dorothy was still alive, but barely. Her lips were blue. Her breathing shallow. Bailey had kept her warm enough to prevent death, but she needed medical attention urgently. Bailey knew it. He could sense that his human was failing. Around 7 a.m., he heard something, voices in the distance. Hikers on the main trail. Bailey had a choice. He could stay hidden as he'd done for 3 years, avoiding human contact. Or he could do something that went against every survival instinct he developed. Seek help from humans. He looked at Dorothy, barely conscious against the tree. Then he made his decision. Bailey began to bark. Loud, insistent barks that echoed through the forest. Kevin and Jennifer Park, a couple in their 30s from Portland, were on day 2 of a 3-day backpacking trip. They'd started hiking at dawn, and were about a mile down the trail when they heard it, a dog barking frantically in the distance. "That sounds like a dog in distress," Jennifer said. "Or it caught something. Could be a hunter's dog. That doesn't sound like hunting barks. That sounds like calling for help." They debated for a moment, then followed the sound. Kevin had his satellite phone. They were experienced hikers who knew to be prepared. They pushed through the undergrowth, off the main trail, following the barking, and found a scene they'd never forget. Elderly woman slumped against a tree, clearly hypothermic and in distress. And large German shepherd mix standing guard, barking to summon help. "Oh my God!" Jennifer gasped, rushing forward. Bailey stopped barking but remained alert, watching as the humans approached his charge. Kevin immediately called emergency services on his satellite phone. "We have elderly woman, approximately 80 years old, hypothermic, disoriented. We're about 1 mile west of the Granite Mountain trailhead. Need immediate rescue." Jennifer wrapped Dorothy in her sleeping bag and her own jacket. "Ma'am, can you hear me? What's your name?" "Dorothy," came the weak response. "I'm Dorothy. I'm looking for my son. We're going to get you help. How long have you been out here?" I don't know. Marcus brought me here. He was getting something from the car. But he didn't come back." Jennifer and Kevin exchanged a dark look. This wasn't a woman who had wandered off. Someone had left her here. The dog, Bailey, sat nearby, watching intently as they cared for Dorothy. When Kevin tried to shoo him away, the dog refused to leave. "It's okay, boy," Jennifer said softly. "We've got her. You did good. You saved her." Within 40 minutes, search and rescue arrived via helicopter. The paramedics assessed Dorothy quickly. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, early signs of frostbite on her fingers, but alive. "How long has she been out here?" one paramedic asked. "Based on her condition, at least 12 hours. Probably overnight. She shouldn't be alive in these conditions at her age." "The dog," Jennifer said. "The dog kept her warm. He was lying on her when we found them. He saved her life." The paramedics looked at Bailey with newfound respect. "Outstanding rescue dog you have there." "He's not ours. We think he's a stray. But he stayed with her all night. And he barked to lead us to her." As they loaded Dorothy onto the stretcher to airlift her to the hospital, Bailey tried to follow. He whined, clearly distressed at being separated from the human he'd protected. "Someone needs to take care of that dog," Jennifer said firmly. "He's a hero. He deserves better than living wild in these woods." Kevin nodded. "I'll stay with him. You go with the helicopter if they'll let you. She needs someone with her who can tell the doctors what happened." At Harborview Medical Center in Seattle, Dorothy was rushed into emergency treatment. Her core body temperature was 94 degrees, dangerously low. Her fingers showed signs of frostbite. She was severely dehydrated and suffering from exposure-related complications. But she was alive. And as the medical team worked to stabilize her, Jennifer Park was talking to Detective Sarah Chen of the Seattle Police Department. "She didn't wander off," Jennifer said firmly. "She said her son Marcus brought her there. That he said he was getting something from the car but never came back. That's not wandering. That's abandonment. Detective Chen felt cold anger rising. The missing person report said she wandered off from Seward Park in Seattle. Not the Cascade Mountains. Well, someone lied. And I think we both know who. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, there was a knock on Marcus Davidson's door. When he opened it, 2 detectives and 2 uniformed officers stood there. Marcus Davidson? Yes. You're under arrest for elderly abuse, abandonment, and filing a false police report. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his world. My mother, he whispered. Is she? She's alive. No thanks to you. A stray dog in the forest showed more humanity than you did. And as Marcus was led to the police car, he realized the full weight of what he'd done, and what he'd lost. Detective Sarah Chen had seen a lot in her 15 years with the Seattle PD, but elder abuse cases always hit her particularly hard. Her own grandmother had suffered neglect in a care facility years ago, and she'd made it her mission to advocate for vulnerable seniors. Now, interviewing Marcus Davidson in the interrogation room, she felt disgust mixed with professional determination to build an airtight case. Let's start with the truth this time, she said, placing crime scene photos on the table, images of where Dorothy had been found. Your mother was discovered 43 miles from where you claimed she wandered off. In the Cascade Mountain Wilderness. Want to explain that? Marcus's lawyer, a public defender named Tom Williams, put a hand on his arm. But Marcus ignored him. I drove her there, he said quietly. I took her into the woods and left her. Jesus, Marcus, Tom muttered. Why? Sarah demanded. And Marcus told the truth. All of it. The Alzheimer's diagnosis. The astronomical care costs. His wife's ultimatum. The feeling of being trapped with no options. The desperate, terrible plan to make Dorothy disappear into state care without any connection to him. I wasn't trying to kill her, Marcus insisted, tears streaming down his face. I swear. I thought someone would find her within hours. That she'd be taken to a hospital, then into state care, and I'd be free of the financial burden, but she'd be taken care of. You left an 81-year-old woman with dementia in mountain wilderness in October. With no coat, no supplies, no way to call for help. You knew she couldn't survive overnight in those conditions. I thought someone would find her before she died of exposure? Sarah's voice was cold. That's what you're banking on? Sheer luck that a hiker would happen by. I didn't know what else to do. You could have called social services. Adult protective services. Applied for emergency Medicaid. Reached out to Alzheimer's organizations for help. Literally anything except abandoning your mother to die in the woods. Tom interjected, Detective, my client has admitted to abandonment. But the intent wasn't homicide. A prosecutor will argue it was depraved indifference. That's second-degree murder in Washington state if she had died. The room fell silent. She didn't die, Marcus said quietly. You said she's alive. How? Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him photos that Kevin Park had sent, Bailey with Dorothy. The dog lying next to her, sharing warmth. The dog standing guard. A stray dog, a German shepherd that's been living wild in those mountains for years, found your mother. He kept her warm through the night. Scared off a cougar. Then barked to alert hikers in the morning. That dog showed more loyalty to your mother in 12 hours than you showed in a lifetime. Marcus stared at the photos, and something broke inside him. He began sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm a monster," he choked out. "I'm a monster." "Yes," Sarah agreed coldly. "You are." At Harborview Medical Center, Dorothy was slowly recovering. Her core temperature had been brought back to normal. The frostbite on her fingers was mild. She'd keep all her digits. Physically, she would survive. But the psychological trauma was another matter. When she was lucid, which was intermittent due to her Alzheimer's, she kept asking about Marcus. And about the dog. "Where's my dog?" she asked repeatedly. "The dog that kept me warm. Where is he?" The nurses didn't have an answer. They knew about the rescue dog from the news, but didn't know where he was now. Jennifer Park, who had stayed at the hospital to give her statement and make sure Dorothy wasn't alone, heard Dorothy asking about Bailey. "I know where he is," Jennifer told the charge nurse. "My husband stayed with him. The dog wouldn't leave the area where we found Dorothy. Kevin called animal control, but they were hours away, so he's been camping with the dog, keeping him there until we figured out what to do. This patient keeps asking for the dog. Is there any way?" Jennifer made a call. 2 days later, something unusual happened at Harborview Medical Center. With special permission from the hospital administration, and after a thorough bath and vet check, Bailey was brought to visit Dorothy. When the dog entered her room, Dorothy's face lit up with recognition that transcended her dementia. "You!" she exclaimed, reaching out. "You're the dog that stayed with me." Bailey approached the bed carefully, tail wagging slowly. When Dorothy touched his head, he leaned into her hand, and then, carefully, gently, placed his head on the edge of her bed. "Good dog," Dorothy whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Such a good dog. You saved me, didn't you?" The nurses in the room were crying. Jennifer Park, present for the reunion, was crying. "What's his name?" Dorothy asked. "We don't know," Jennifer admitted. "He's a stray. He's been living wild in the mountains for years, apparently." "His name is Bailey," Dorothy said with sudden certainty, even though she had no way of knowing that had been his name years ago. "He told me. His name is Bailey." And Bailey, hearing that name for the first time in 3 years, wagged his tail harder and licked Dorothy's hand. The story exploded in the media. Hero dog saves abandoned woman in mountains. Son arrested for leaving mother to die. Stray dog becomes guardian angel. Bailey the wonder dog, the stray who refused to abandon. News crews from across the country descended on Seattle. Bailey's photo was everywhere. The story captured hearts globally. The loyal dog who had done what Dorothy's own son wouldn't, stayed. Animal welfare organizations called it one of the most remarkable rescue stories in recent memory. Behaviorists were fascinated by Bailey's decision to break his pattern of avoiding humans to protect Dorothy. "Dogs have been bred for thousands of years to protect and serve humans," one expert explained on the news. "Even after abandonment, even after years of living wild, those instincts can remain strong." Bailey's decision to help Dorothy and then to actively seek human help by barking shows remarkable intelligence and retained socialization. But the public didn't need scientific explanations. They understood the simple truth: Bailey was a hero. Offers to adopt Bailey poured in. Thousands of them. Celebrities, wealthy families, Dog lovers across the country all wanted to give Bailey a home. But there was one voice that mattered most. "I want him," Dorothy told the social worker assigned to her case. "I want to adopt Bailey." "Mrs. Davidson, you have Alzheimer's. You need care yourself. Taking on a dog might not be. He saved my life. And I'm not leaving this hospital without him." It was perhaps the most lucid and determined Dorothy had been since her diagnosis. The legal and practical complications were enormous. Dorothy couldn't live alone. She needed memory care. But most memory care facilities didn't allow pets. Marcus was in jail, facing serious charges. He'd lost his job. Sarah had filed for divorce and taken the kids. He had nothing to offer his mother even if he hadn't been incarcerated. Dorothy's small house and savings, which Marcus had been trying to avoid spending down, now became crucial. With proper planning and Medicaid assistance, there might be enough to cover care. But where could Dorothy live with Bailey? The answer came from an unexpected source: Green Valley Memory Care Community, a progressive facility that specialized in Alzheimer's care and had a unique pet therapy program. "We've been following Mrs. Davidson's story," the director, Dr. Rachel Morgan, told the social worker. "We'd like to offer her a place here. And we'll make an exception to our pet policy for Bailey. We've seen the bond between them. Separating them would be cruel. And frankly, Bailey provides better companionship and grounding for her than any therapy we could offer." It was perfect. Almost too perfect. "There's a catch," Dr. Morgan admitted. "Our facility costs $7,000 a month. With Dorothy's assets and Medicaid, we can cover about half. We'd need to fundraise or find sponsorship for the rest." The social worker smiled. "I don't think that will be a problem." She was right. Within 24 hours of Green Valley's story going public, donations poured in. A GoFundMe raised $300,000 in 3 days. Multiple organizations offered to cover Dorothy's care costs indefinitely. "Bailey saved a life," one donor wrote. "Now we get to save 2. 3 weeks after her rescue, Dorothy Davidson moved into Green Valley Memory Care Community. And Bailey moved with her. The dog who had been abandoned in the mountains, who had survived alone for 3 years, who had protected a stranger through the coldest night, now had a home, a purpose, and a person who loved him. Dorothy's room was decorated with photos, her late husband Robert, her grandchildren, and prominently displayed, the photo of Bailey lying next to her in the forest. "That's my hero," she'd tell anyone who visited, pointing at Bailey. "He saved my life." And Bailey, wearing a new collar with a tag that read, "Bailey, Hero," would wag his tail and rest his head in Dorothy's lap. He'd found his pack again. He was home. Marcus Davidson's trial began 4 months after Dorothy's rescue. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney James Morrison, presented a damning case. Medical experts testified about how close Dorothy had come to death. The parks testified about finding her in critical condition. Photographs of the remote location showed just how calculated Marcus's abandonment had been. "This wasn't a moment of panic," Morrison argued. Marcus Davidson drove 43 miles out of his way, deep into mountain wilderness, and left his mother there to die. Then he lied to police, sending searchers to the wrong place. If not for a stray dog, Dorothy Davidson would have died of exposure. The defense tried to paint Marcus as desperate and overwhelmed. "My client faced financial ruin," Tom Williams argued. "His mother's care costs were astronomical. Yes, His decision was catastrophically wrong. But it came from desperation, not malice. Desperation. Morrison countered. There were resources available: emergency Medicaid, respite care programs, Alzheimer's support organizations. Mr. Davidson didn't exhaust his options. He went straight to abandonment. Sarah Davidson testified for the prosecution. I told him to find proper care. I never suggested abandoning her. When he said she'd wandered off, I believed him. I'm horrified by what he actually did. The most powerful moment came when Dorothy testified, with Bailey beside her wheelchair for support. Do you know why you're here, Mrs. Davidson? The prosecutor asked gently. I'm here about Marcus, my son. Can you tell us what happened on October 15th? Marcus said we were going to the doctor. But we went to the woods. He told me to wait while he got something from the car. I waited a long time, but he never came back. How did that make you feel? Scared. It was getting dark and cold. I didn't know where I was. I called for Marcus, but he didn't come. Did anyone come? Dorothy brightened. Bailey came. My dog stayed with me. He kept me warm all night. He protected me. Mrs. Davidson, did you understand your son left you intentionally? Dorothy's lucidity wavered. Marcus wouldn't do that. Marcus loves me. Maybe he got lost too. Marcus broke down sobbing. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Dorothy looked confused. Don't cry, sweetheart. Everything will be okay. The courtroom was silent. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts: elderly abuse, abandonment with intent to cause harm, and filing false police reports. At sentencing, the judge spoke directly to Marcus. Mr. Davidson, your 81-year-old mother with Alzheimer's was alone in the forest, confused and terrified, slowly freezing to death because you decided her life was too inconvenient. You had options. Many options. You chose abandonment. I sentence you to 8 years in state prison, eligible for parole after serving 60%. You are permanently prohibited from contact with Dorothy Davidson. Marcus's life was destroyed. Career over. Marriage over. Relationship with his children shattered. He had gambled that abandoning Dorothy would solve his problems. Instead, it had destroyed everything. Meanwhile, Dorothy found unexpected peace at Green Valley Memory Care. Bailey was by her side constantly. He understood her condition intuitively. When she got confused or agitated, he would lean against her, grounding her. When she wandered at night, Bailey would gently guide her back to bed. Bailey is better than any medication, Dr. Morgan told staff. He provides constant companionship, reduces anxiety, gives her purpose. Dorothy's decline continued, the cruel reality of Alzheimer's. There were bad days when she didn't know where she was. But she always knew Bailey. Even on her worst days, she'd see Bailey and smile. My dog. My good dog. The media attention gradually faded, but their story had lasting impact. Washington state passed Dorothy's Law, expanding resources for Alzheimer's caregivers and increasing penalties for elder abandonment. Green Valley received so much funding they opened a second facility for Alzheimer's patients with pets. Bailey's House became a model for pet-inclusive memory care nationwide. And Bailey inspired thousands to adopt senior dogs and dogs with difficult backgrounds. Bailey had every reason to stay wild, to avoid humans who had hurt him, one article stated. But when he found someone more vulnerable, his instinct to protect kicked in. He reminds us that loyalty and compassion aren't things we teach dogs, they're things dogs teach us. 2 years after the rescue, Dorothy's condition had deteriorated to late-stage Alzheimer's. Most days she was nonverbal. But she still recognized Bailey. Staff would find them together constantly. Dorothy's hand on Bailey's head, the dog lying beside her bed, both existing in peaceful space beyond words. When Dorothy passed quietly in her sleep at age 83, Bailey was beside her. The dog seemed to understand. He lay next to her for hours, refusing to leave. Bailey was adopted by Dr. Rachel Morgan. He gave Dorothy 2 years of peace she wouldn't have had otherwise. The least I can do is give him a loving home. Marcus was released from prison after serving 5 years. He was 57, his mother dead, his children distant, his life in ruins. He visited Dorothy's grave once. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I'm sorry I wasn't as loyal as a stray dog." He spent his remaining years working in a warehouse, attending therapy, trying to rebuild relationships with his children. It was too late for Dorothy. But every year on the anniversary of her rescue, he donated to Green Valley Memory Care. It was inadequate. It was too late. But it was all he had. The dog had saved his mother's life. And in showing him what he should have been, the dog had saved his soul too. 5 years after Dorothy's death, Bailey lived 3 peaceful years with Dr. Rachel Morgan before passing away at age 9. He was buried at Green Valley in a garden dedicated to therapy animals. His headstone read, "Bailey, hero, he protected the vulnerable when no one else would. He stayed when others left. He loved without question. Good boy. The very best boy." But Bailey's story didn't end with his death. It had sparked something much larger. Green Valley Memory Care had expanded dramatically. The original Bailey's House, the pet-inclusive memory care facility funded by donations after Bailey and Dorothy's story, now had 5 locations across Washington state. Dr. Rachel Morgan stood in the newest facility, looking at the wall dedicated to Bailey. Dozens of photos, Bailey with Dorothy, Bailey with other residents, Bailey's paw print preserved in clay, and letters, hundreds of them, from families whose lives had been touched by his story. "We get calls every week," Rachel told a visiting journalist from National Geographic, doing a feature on animal-assisted therapy. Families who heard Bailey's story and realized they had options they didn't know existed. Families who were at breaking point, considering desperate measures, who found help instead. How many families would you estimate? In 5 years? Conservatively, over 2,000 families have contacted us directly because of Bailey's story. They've accessed resources, found care solutions, avoided the kind of tragedy that nearly happened to Dorothy. The journalist was writing this down. So Bailey didn't just save one life. No. He saved thousands. Indirectly, but no less real. The Bailey Protocol had become standard practice in elder care advocacy across the country. It was a system developed after Dorothy's case, ensuring that families in crisis with Alzheimer's patients were immediately connected with emergency financial assistance programs, respite care options, mental health support for caregivers, legal guidance on Medicaid and benefits, 24/7 crisis hotline for caregivers at breaking point. "We named it after Bailey," explained Margaret Chen, director of the National Alzheimer's Association, "because he represented what we should all aspire to, refusing to abandon the vulnerable, even when it's difficult." The protocol had been implemented in 47 states. And the statistics were remarkable. Reports of elder abandonment had dropped 34% in areas where the Bailey Protocol was active. Bailey saved Dorothy, Margaret said in a conference presentation. But his legacy is saving thousands of other Dorothys, and preventing thousands of other families from making the terrible choice Marcus Davidson made. At Washington State Prison, Marcus Davidson, now 62, sat in the visiting room across from his daughter, Emily, now 24. She visited once a month. More than Marcus deserved, he knew. "I got accepted to veterinary school," Emily said. "University of Washington." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud. I'm specializing in animal behavior and therapy animals. Because of Bailey. Because of what he did for Grandma." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "Your grandmother would have loved that. I'm writing my entrance essay about Bailey. About loyalty and redemption. About how animals can teach us to be better humans." She paused. "Is it okay if I write about what happened? About you. About how I abandoned my mother and a dog had to save her? About how one terrible decision rippled outward. How it destroyed some things but also created change that saved lives. About complexity and consequences." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "If it helps even one person make a better choice than I did, then yes. Write about it. All of it." "I'm not ready to forgive you completely," Emily said honestly. "I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm trying to understand. And I'm trying to make something good come from something terrible. That's more than I deserve. Thank you." After Emily left, Marcus returned to his cell. He pulled out a worn photograph, the only one he had of his mother. Dorothy smiling, younger, healthier, before Alzheimer's had stolen her mind. And next to it, a newspaper clipping he'd kept. Bailey lying next to Dorothy in the forest, the photo taken by Kevin Park before the rescue. "I'm sorry I wasn't like him, Mom," Marcus whispered to the photos. "I'm sorry I wasn't loyal like Bailey." 10 years after the rescue, the annual Bailey's Walk had become a major event in Seattle. Thousands of people, with their dogs, gathered at the trailhead where Dorothy had been found. They walked the same path Kevin and Jennifer Park had taken that morning, following Bailey's barks to save a life. The event raised money for Green Valley Memory Care and Alzheimer's research. But more than that, it had become a celebration of loyalty, compassion, and second chances. Kevin and Jennifer Park, now in their 40s, were the honorary leaders. They walked with their own rescue dog, a German Shepherd mix they'd adopted after Bailey's story. "People ask us all the time what it was like finding Dorothy and Bailey that day," Jennifer told a crowd before the walk began. "And the truth is, it changed us fundamentally. We saw what real loyalty looks like. What real courage looks like. From a dog who had been abandoned, who had every reason to be bitter and broken, but who chose love instead." "Bailey didn't save Dorothy because he was trained," Kevin continued. "He wasn't a service dog. He was a stray who'd been thrown away. He saved her because somewhere in his canine heart, he knew she needed help. And he refused to walk away." "That's what we're celebrating today," Jennifer said. "Not just Bailey. But the choice to stay. The choice to help. The choice to be loyal, even when it's hard." The crowd, over 5,000 people, began the walk. Dogs of all sizes and breeds. Families with elderly relatives in wheelchairs. Alzheimer's patients with their caregivers. People wearing shirts that said, "Be like Bailey." At the gravesite in Green Valley's Memorial Garden, Dr. Rachel Morgan stood with a small group for a more private ceremony. Dorothy's grandchildren, Emily and her brother Jason, were there. Jennifer and Kevin Park, representatives from the Alzheimer's Association, and several residents of Green Valley who had known Bailey in his final years. 10 years ago, Rachel began, a dog chose loyalty over survival. A dog chose to protect a stranger. And that single choice created ripples that are still spreading. Dorothy lived 2 more peaceful years because of Bailey. But thousands of other seniors are living better lives because Bailey's story inspired change. The Bailey Protocol. Dorothy's Law. 5 Bailey houses across the state. Increased funding for Alzheimer's research and caregiver support. 1 dog. 1 night in the forest. And the world became a little bit better. Emily stepped forward and placed flowers on both graves, Dorothy's and Bailey's, side by side. Grandma, Bailey, thank you for showing us what matters. For teaching us that family isn't just blood. It's who chooses to stay.